Hi everyone, welcome back to Aspergers from the Inside. You're here with Paul Mikolev, and I make weekly videos sharing the human side of autism. So make sure you hit subscribe if you'd like to keep up with the latest content. So today's Patron's Choice video is, does autism get easier with age? So if you've seen some of my videos before, you can probably guess my answer to this question, which is, it depends, kind of. Let's clarify the question a little bit. But interestingly, I put this question to the community on Facebook, and there was an overwhelming consensus with the responses to that question. And the overwhelming consensus is no, autism does not get easier with age. Autism gets significantly harder with age. So today I'm going to go through 4 things that do get easier with age, sandwiched in the middle with 5 things that get significantly harder as we get older. And finally, to end on a positive note, 3 things that help significantly to mitigate these factors. The first thing that gets easier is self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-discovery. So by far the number one response was that discovering autism, discovering more about myself, helped me to become more authentically myself, helped me to understand what was going on, helped me to be nicer to myself, to forgive myself for the things that I can't do very well, things that are really hard for me, and also to focus on the things that I am really good at. So there's a huge ongoing benefit from that self-discovering process. And that is definitely something that as we get older, as we learn more about ourselves, it can make things easier. So some things that people said: it's better knowing why I feel the way I do. When I was young, I thought I was weird and everyone else was normal. It's comforting to know that I'm not alone. Someone else said, I'm happier and more settled since my late diagnosis at 51. Another said, it seems easier. I'm so much nicer to myself now. I'm no longer angry with myself for not being able to control my thoughts, compulsions, and anxiety. And finally, just one more example. The older I get, the less I care what other people think. I do what makes me comfortable, and I've stopped trying to conform to social norms. So in that sense, the first thing that makes autism easier with age is self-awareness and finding solutions that work for ourselves. The second one is also related to that. As we get older, we develop more skills. So another way of saying this is that life doesn't get easier. We just get better at managing it. So this ties in, as I said, a lot to the self-awareness and self-knowledge. It's about finding solutions to everyday problems, everyday problems like, what food do I eat? What do I wear? How do I pay the bills? How do I meet my social needs and physical needs and intellectual needs and all of those kind of everyday things that everyone has to do. Understanding how the world works and how we work helps significantly in finding better solutions to that. I remember talking to a parent I know a little while back, and she was sharing a story from her 9-year-old. And she asked her 9-year-old, why do you seem so much better now? Like you were really struggling a few years back. And he said, very interestingly, he said, I understand now. Talking about when he was younger, when he was 6 years old, everything was happening around him and he didn't know why it was happening and he couldn't control it. But now, at the mature age of 9 years old, he can understand more about how the world works, more about how he works, and it makes everything a lot easier. So number 3 of the things that get easier with age is, often, as we get older, we have more control over our environment. We have more choice of this kind of situations that we put ourselves in, the kind of path that we lead with our life. So this means that we have the freedom to avoid the situations we don't like, and that can make a huge difference. A common thing that I hear a lot of parents say is that their young person's transition to independence made a huge difference. And finally, they have the agency, I guess, to make choices that suit them really well, rather than being forced to stick with, what their parents thought was the best in their own interest. But obviously, those kind of decisions, where do I live, how do I live, being stuck in the family home is not always enough freedom to overcome certain issues. So having the independence to get my own house or have my own space or choose how I spend my time can make a really, really big difference. Some life stages, so this is number 4 of the things that make it easier. Some life stages are easier than others. So often, not all the time, but often childhood is reported as being a relatively nice experience. A common first big stumbling block is school, and this relates a lot to the ability to control your own environments. When you're a young child and your parents are controlling the environment for you, they have the ability to make sure that you're always in a place that you can cope with. Whereas at school, there's a lot of structures and a lot of things that get imposed on you that you don't really have a lot of control over. So starting primary school is often a challenge. Sometimes that gets a bit better in terms of later in primary school, and there's a couple of years, again, this is not everybody, but a common experience is that late primary age can be a little bit easier when we get into the habit of school. But unfortunately, a big challenge for a lot of people is entering those teenage years, entering high school, and unfortunately, if you talk to those in the community, a lot of us have had extremely challenging experiences at school, especially high school. But after that, a lot of people report that when you finally get enough independence and understand yourself well enough and be able to kind of find who you are and come into your own a little bit, then sometimes young adulthood is a really nice time. Now, I really want to stress that this is not the case for everybody. Everybody has a different experience. Everybody matures at a different time. It's actually also quite a common story to hear much older adults, like 60 plus, tell me about basically a new lease on life that they've suddenly got because they've finally figured out who they are and becoming more authentically themselves at that age, usually due to discovering autism and the autism community. I know for me personally, high school was probably the most challenging time, but once I escaped that, left that behind and got to university, they were some of the best supported years of my entire life. And that's a huge topic that I can go into. So I'll probably have to make a whole separate video sharing how sometimes, if everything lines up, that can be a really good time. There are a lot of things that get significantly harder with age. So number 1, as I mentioned earlier, especially for young kids, school and teenage years can be incredibly tough. And I accidentally kind of covered that earlier, so I'll skip over that one now. But kids can be really cruel. It's a challenging time at the best of times for any young person, those teenage years, trying to figure out who you are and dealing with all of the new social nuances. So autism makes all of that kind of stuff doubly complicated. The second thing that gets more challenging as we get older is, in general, we get less support the older we get into adulthood and independence anyway. So children, teenagers, and even young adults receive a significant amount of support from their family, usually. But as you get older, you're expected to do more and more of those little things by yourself. Things like going shopping, cooking dinner, managing a budget, coordinating your schedule. Right? This can be a huge drain on executive function because these things are 100% necessary to get by in everyday life, but they don't happen by themselves. And so they can take a lot of energy that suddenly I don't have for the rest of life. So even someone like me today, right? Even today, I rely significantly on my wife for a lot of tiny little everyday things. Things like responding to social invites, keeping a schedule of what we're doing on the weekend, buying gifts for people, telling me it's time to buy new clothes again. Like, but didn't I go shopping 3 years ago? Are you really telling me I have to go again? Is it really that important? But of course, these things have to keep ticking over. So relying on family and friends can really help. In a similar way, schools and universities and even workplaces can be quite structured, and that is actually a good thing a lot of the time. And when we don't have that structure, in a completely unstructured space, it puts even more of a burden on executive function to try and figure out what I'm supposed to do. So a good example of this is, okay, I've just finished school and I'm not sure what I'm doing yet. What do I do? How do other people know what to do? And this happens in similar situations much later in life as well, whether that's after a relationship has ended, or maybe a redundancy or a change of job, or retirement. Complete lack of structure can really throw some people. Number 3 of the things that get harder with age is that as you get older, other people get less understanding and have less of a tolerance towards things that are a bit out of the box. So kids are cute, they're quirky, they do things a bit differently and weirdly, and that's completely fine. We love that. When adults do that kind of thing, all of a sudden it's annoying and they should have known better, right? We give kids slack all the time. Whereas, especially young adulthood into sort of your 30s and 40s, we're expected to know better. Expectations rise rapidly. Advanced social skills that nobody teaches you, like how to subtly get your boss to consider you for a promotion, subtle social cues, hidden agendas, office politics, not to mention navigating intimate relationships as well. The amount of slack that other people give you can reduce significantly when we're expected to be competent, fully functioning adults. Number 4 is that as an adult with those responsibilities, it comes with adult-sized consequences for dropping the ball or making a mistake. Right? When kids and even young adults make mistakes, it's usually no big deal. They'll get another chance, right? Unfortunately, adult-sized consequences look like broken marriages, long-term unemployment, no stable housing, chronic health issues, complete isolation. These things can be really crushing to deal with if you don't have the support to get through it. I know that when I was in my 20s, right, I just finished university, people were basically throwing jobs at me, wanting to give me a chance and see how I would go. When you're 50, that doesn't happen anymore. All of a sudden, your difference is seen more as like a liability and a risk rather than let's take a chance on this person. They're a bit different and we'll see what happens, like difference as a potential asset. This is not so much of a problem if you're in the same job for 40 years, but unfortunately these days that's pretty rare and we are required to change jobs and change locations quite frequently. And unfortunately, this means that unemployment is a huge problem in our adult community. And the older you get, I hear, the harder it is to get people to give you a chance with jobs. Number 5 is a little bit related. A lot of people commented this, and I mean a lot. A lot of people spoke about dwindling tolerance levels, right? Especially in the sort of 60 plus age group. It becomes harder to tolerate things in life. Masking becomes more effort. Sensory issues seem to get amplified. Stress, anxiety, sleep, other physical ailments that are sort of pretty standard as we get older, right? All of these things kind of add up and take a toll on energy that it takes to just cope with life. If you used to put up with a lot, and unfortunately, the adults that are getting diagnosed these days didn't know anything about autism 30 years ago. So our default was to put up with anything and everything. because we had to, because the world wasn't very accommodating. But as you get older, the feedback I hear is that people say, I just don't have the energy or motivation to do that anymore, right? Why continue to put up with a world that is not very friendly? That's all the bad stuff. Let's have a bit of a change of energy, right? The news is not all bad. There were a number of responses from people in their 70s and beyond that were resoundingly positive. So let's look at a couple of things that can make life significantly easier. The first thing that can make life significantly easier is a supportive network of friends and family. So if you have a close social network, it can automatically overcome a lot of the things we were talking about before. If there's one tiny little task that I find difficult, like booking a doctor's appointment, I can have a friend or family member just call up on my behalf or something. And all of a sudden, those tiny little things that are really important and make a big difference when you drop them, they don't get dropped anymore because I've got a little bit of support. The experience that I've seen both in my coaching and hearing from the autistic community is that if you're in a long-term relationship, if you have a supportive family, then very often people are more likely to report doing really well and more like that new lease on life, I'm finally discovering myself, this is amazing kind of a vibe, rather than the everything is getting harder and harder and I don't know how long I'm going to be able to cope kind of vibe, which is the opposite when we don't have that support. The second thing that makes things significantly easier is having a job. Maybe this is common sense a little bit, but financial security, having a place to live, having something to do makes a huge difference. My theory on work is that we all need something to do, something to pay the bills, and something to be creative with, right? Now, these don't all necessarily need to come from the one job, but actually having some kind of paid employment ticks a lot of these boxes. So it's a really great place to start. Even volunteer work, even working 1 day a week, even just being a part of a community and having a job, even having a role in a family or as a parent or grandparent or just having something to do makes a huge difference to self-esteem and to those social connections. And anyway, finally, the last thing that makes the biggest difference, and we touched on this right at the beginning of this video today, self-knowledge and having an environment that either you can control or that suits you really well. So I get this time and time again from people all over the world that the brilliant thing about discovering autism is finally discovering themselves, finally knowing themselves, accepting themselves, being kind to themselves. This opens up an entirely new world of new ways to do things, new ways to cope, new strategies to try, realizations of why things in the past didn't work. It wasn't your fault it didn't work. There was an obvious reason that if I go into this situation, obviously that's not going to work because I know how I interact. So becoming yourself and understanding yourself can open up a huge world of differences. Anyway, I think we should probably leave it there for today. We've gone through quite a bit in this video and discussion on does autism get easier with age? If you have something you'd like to add to this discussion, please leave it in the comments. Comments are a great way to interact with the video and to hear from the rest of the community. This topic today was chosen by our Patreon community. So if you'd like to have your say in next month's Patron's Choice video, you can become a cup of coffee supporter of this channel for less than $1 a week. So please consider that if you're able. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you tune in again this same time next week and subscribe to the channel so that you get all of the latest content. So thanks a lot. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.